The rape revenge subgenre of horror is a touchy subject. It's often very taboo, and it's one that a lot of people tend to shy away from, for good reason. But is it a story that's worth telling? I think so. And let's review one of the most controversial films of all time, I Spit on Your Grave. Let's do this. Spit on Your Grave stars Camille Keaton, Aaron Tabor, and is directed by Mir Zarki. What is up, guys? I'm often lured into discussing controversial films. I did it with Last House on the Left. I did both versions. There's something about the subject matter that really just draws me in it, and I find it very interesting to discuss because it's controversial, and where there's controversy, there's also debate. And I'd say those types of reviews tend to get the most comments. And I do have a history with this movie. I'm literally watching it on Jolene right now. This is the first time I've ever reviewed a movie while I actually have it playing on VHS and I'm looking at it. I don't know why. It just was a spur of the moment type thing. I was like, you know what, I'll throw this on. This is the actual VHS that I bought a couple years ago. This is one of the first memories I have of going to a video store and just browsing the horror section, and this particular cover just leaps out at you. And this cover is a big reason why this movie eventually became successful, because it took a couple years for it to catch on. We're going to get into that. And you can see it right there. There's Camille Keaton playing Jennifer, sitting in her hammock, and the horrible atrocity is about to take fold here pretty soon. But right after I first came in the military, I'd say about the early 90s, I went through this phase where I wanted to rent, I guess, video nasties, the movies that most people shy away from in terms of horror. And I'll even come clean. I did like Faces of Death, which that's the only time I've ever watched that. And I was like, what the hell did I just watch? And then I rented this movie, I Spit on Your Grave. That is the last time I have watched this movie. It has been literally over 30 years since I watched it, just because the subject matter is tough to watch, and the rape scene is probably the most controversial rape scene ever. It's literally like 25 minutes. So it's not a movie that's for the squeamish. It's not like an easy watch for even, you know, diehard horror fans. I'd say that these aren't the types of films that you could throw in like, say, Halloween. You know, these are movies that you have to brace yourself and get ready for. Even like The Exorcist is that way. But this takes it even further. But it's definitely a movie that I wanted to discuss. So I just watched it for the first time in 30 years. I literally picked up the box set, the I Spit on Your Grave box set. And it's a 4K remaster directly from Mir Zarki's own personal archive. He has a 35mm print of the film, completely restored it. And the picture is glorious looking. But his son actually did a documentary growing up with I Spit on Your Grave. And I just watched this too. And I love good horror documentaries, especially for like 70s horror.
That's 9-year-old me and my sister. 2 years earlier, she and my father witnessed the aftermath of a sexual assault. So my dad made a movie about it called
I Spit on Your Grave.
And this was fantastic, actually. I loved every second of it. Knowing the behind the scenes, and more importantly, getting the context of why this movie even came to be. But before we get into the backstory, the context, all that, let's give a quick plot synopsis, okay? Jennifer Hill, she is a writer from New York, and she goes to this small little cabin in Connecticut. And she just wants to have some solitude. She wants to write. And like that hammock scene I just showed you, she's just sitting there jotting down some ideas, and then all of a sudden these two guys in this boat come up, and they just provoke her. Before that, when she first gets into the town, she arrives at the gas station. You got this married guy working at the gas station, and the two loser friends, they're really just talking about women in the most degrading way. They see women as property, and that's a big theme throughout this movie. And so based on their own sexual urges and their own insecurities, I guess, they repeatedly rape Jennifer in the woods behind her cabin. That is the first half of the movie. The second half is Jennifer getting her revenge. And let me just restate this. This rape scene It is honestly the most shocking scene of rape I've ever seen put to film. Just by the way it plays out, the length of it, the nature of the scenes, the way they even handle Camille Keaton in the scenes. And to give the men in this movie a little bit of credit, because it psychologically messed them up quite a bit. They were only able to find 2 of the 4 guys. And the 2 that were there, one of them looked at it as a good experience, acting-wise. The other one, he will not watch the movie to this day. It really just messed him up mentally. And it just wasn't a pleasurable experience. He is a family man, and he doesn't even want his kids to see the movie to this day. And keep in mind, guys, this is the late 70s. This is like the golden age of video nasties, the drive-in era. This was a time where it was pretty common to see these types of films like Last House on the Left. Even still, this movie, head and shoulders above the pack, just because of how controversial it is and how it just does not hold back whatsoever. It doesn't let up. You're almost begging the rape scenes to end. So as we get into the backstory of this movie, you're asking yourself, why? Why did Mayor Zarki make a film that is just so relentless? And here's the context. Mayor Zarki, a couple years before he made this movie, he actually helped a rape victim. She was raped in this park, and she found him and a friend, and they got her to the police. And Mayor has stated that once they got to the police, the way this woman was treated was really just disgusting. They treated her like she was a criminal almost, like she deserved what she got, like she did something to provoke this heinous atrocity. And it got to the point where Mayor and his friend were like, we need to get her to a hospital right now. This is getting out of hand. And so he was so emotional by this experience that immediately he started writing. And his sole purpose for the tone and the pacing of this movie was to really cause a reaction to the viewer, for the viewer to actually feel what the victim has felt. Obviously, those that have never experienced this are still not going to experience what a real rape victim went through. But it will give you a little bit of context of what they go through and just how heinous this crime is. I've just given you the context of the whole situation, and knowing that, now you know why he made this movie so in your face and so brutal. And jumping back to those 4 gentlemen that did this movie and how hard it was for them, because they were just actors, they didn't know how far the rape scenes would go. And once they got on set and into the scenes and they were told, okay, this is going to be a real long, drawn-out rape scene. The male actors felt so bad for Camille Keaton that they kind of united in taking off their own clothes. They stated that if she's going to feel uncomfortable, then we want to feel uncomfortable. That's why you see everybody naked in these scenes. Now, let's talk about Camille Keaton. There are actresses that take on roles that might have some tough stunt work, some overly emotional scenes, but to take on a rape scene, especially one like I Spit on Your Grave, it's going to take something out of you. And just imagine what Camille Keaton had to go through. The famous scene on the rock, when she was doing that scene, she became so emotional because, you know, the shoot just went on for forever. And at the end of the scene, Mayor wanted her to roll off of the rock. And she said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm done with this scene. She went to her trailer. She just completely had an emotional breakdown. After she got through all that, she finally came back out. She said, okay, let's do this. Let's finish the scene because it's cinema and the movie will last forever. And I think Camille Keaton believed in what the message of the movie was. She wanted the viewer to completely understand the actions that she was going to take in the second half of this movie. However she killed these guys in the second half of the movie, the viewer would have no problem with it whatsoever. In order to do that, you have to let the scene play out like it's supposed to play out. You have to convey it in the proper way. I'm not saying they had to go as long as they did. The message is there, and I'm not saying this is a perfect movie by any means, but it's an important film. But I just have to applaud Camille Keaton, her performance, because when this movie came out, it was completely obliterated by critics. A lot of critics were, you know, they saw this as like a snuff film. They saw this as porn. And speaking of critics, Siskel and Ebert pretty much made this film famous.
If you are a teenager, you may not have heard of the term video nasties or gross-out films. These terms refer to a whole group of pictures full of blood and guts, sometimes real, sometimes fake. And kids are renting them voraciously and holding video nasty parties in their homes to see if they are man enough or woman enough to sit through all this disgusting gore.
Both of them made it a mission to just completely trash this movie, calling it the worst film ever made. And you know, these are two critics that are high profile. You know, you would constantly see their names and their reviews in newspapers and magazines. So obviously, people want to know, what is this movie that they're talking about? When I Spit on Your Grave first came out, it was called Day of the Woman, 1978. When it was released, it did nothing. This is a great example of how important a name and a poster can be. You know, the original poster had Camille Keaton, which is a very effective poster. I don't think it was Camille Keaton being on there that was the problem. I think it was just the name was kind of bland, but more importantly, it didn't really get the message across as much. Because Day of the Woman can mean like anything, you know? So a couple years later, a distributor bought the rights to do the film, and he said, I'm going to change the name to I Spit on Your Grave. Mayor Zarky still to this day does not like the name, and he really hated it at first. But immediately after he changed the name of the movie, people got it. You know, I Spit on Your Grave. What does that say? That says that whoever dies in this movie, she's not pulling any punches. You know, she's really, really, really pissed off, and she wants these fuckers to pay. I Spit on Your Grave.
I want to do it. You made me do it.
Suck it, bitch.
Also, the timing was great too, because this was pretty much the dawn of the VHS era. And the cover for I Spit on Your Grave is probably one of the most identifiable and popular VHS covers in horror. It just leaps out at you. We talked about that earlier. That is a big reason why this movie ended up doing so well. It was one of the top selling horror VHSs back in the day. The version I have, it's an Anchor Bay version that came out, I think, like in the early 2000s, late 90s, something like that. Now, I think one of the most important scenes in this movie is the scene where Jennifer goes to the church. Not for religious reasons. The fact that that scene is there kind of justifies her actions after. After she's raped and some time goes by, she knows what she has to do. And so Jennifer goes to this church. She gets on her knees and she says, Father, forgive me for what I'm about to do. It's kind of like her prelude. I'm about to kill every one of these guys. Please forgive me. And I think that makes it more impactful because Jennifer is a religious person. And she's willing to do something that she knows she's not supposed to do. Thou shalt not kill. But she feels like she has to do it. She has to get that revenge, to be at peace. That's the only thing that's going to bring her peace and let her move on with her life. These men, they need to die. In her eyes, they're evil. Also, speaking of the rape scene, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the rape scene, but there's a part of the scene where she gets back to her house, her cabin. And I think visually, Mayor Zarky's vision is just striking. There's this scene where she's crawling, and it looks like she's crawling to ask the viewer for help. And then eventually you see the phone there. And so she's trying to get the phone, and then the phone is kicked out of the way, which is kind of plays off as a jump scare, but jump scares are not in this movie. This is not that type of movie whatsoever. But I've never felt for a victim in a film like I Spit on Your Grave. It's just one of those movies where you want to reach through the screen and you want to pull this person out. You want to help them so bad. And I think that scene was so important. And just to give Mayer even more credit, I mean, he literally directed every movement that Camille Keaton made. Not to take anything away from her performance. She did an amazing job, but Mayer's just the type of director that knows exactly the type of film that he wants to make. If he wants you to turn right, he's going to say, I need you to turn your face right. You know, there's really no room for improv whatsoever, unless it's coming from him. And so when you watch this movie, it comes across as a very structured film. You can look at it frame by frame, and everything has a purpose. Now let's talk about the kills for a bit. Obviously there are 4 kills in this movie because there's 4 guys. And this probably has one of the most infamous kills in horror history. And that, of course, is when the guy gets his penis cut off in the bathtub. I still remember that to this day. If I remember anything from I Spit on Your Grave, it's that scene. And it's directed very well, actually. And really, every scene of revenge in this movie involves seduction on the part of Jennifer to the victim. And it really sets up how one-dimensional and just dumb, for lack of a better term, these guys are. The one thing that caused them to commit this heinous crime to Jennifer is the one thing that gets them killed. You know, they are not intelligent enough to see that she's setting them up. I guess for lack of a better phrase, they're thinking with their dick. And that's what gets them killed. And I love that Mayer played it out like that. That's why this is a feminist film. But for the longest time when it first came out, they didn't call it that at all. They didn't think it was a feminist film. I don't know if this is true or not, but Ebert even stated that when he watched this movie in the theaters, the guys were literally cheering during the rape scene. If you can imagine that. That's the most disgusting thing you could possibly ever imagine. And I think that reaction caused the overall reaction of the movie. People didn't see the movie as it was intended. Mayor Zarki was surprised. Even when the film was being shot, the people of Connecticut were starting to spread rumors that he was shooting a porno. He literally went to the church and stated that we're not shooting a porno. And he even showed the priest some of the scenes from the movie. And as soon as the priest saw the movie and got the overall context and the idea of the movie, he told Mayor Zarki, don't worry about the opinions of the townsfolk, okay? If anybody gives you crap, send them to me. And that's pretty damn cool. Now, I've talked quite a bit about this film. I knew that this was going to be a long review. One thing I definitely want to leave you with is something that Wes Craven stated about Last House on the Left. And I've stated this many times before on my channel, that art is not safe. You have to show the dark side of life just as you show, you know, the lighter side of life. Yeah, movies are supposed to be fun, but they're also supposed to cause a reaction. You know, I would much rather a film like I Spit on Your Grave cause a reaction, be it negative, be it positive, be it whatever, than just a movie that just goes by the numbers, doesn't really do anything for you, and you forget it 5 minutes later. When you watch I Spit on Your Grave, you will never forget it. Like I said, I saw it 30 years ago. It never left my brain. And when I watched it this time, everything came rushing back. I almost remembered every frame that I saw 30 years before. It's hard to rate a movie like this. It really is. I'm going to give it a purchase worthy just because of how important I think the film is. And I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves. We need directors like Mayor Zarki that are willing to step outside of the line. I don't even know if he was thinking of a line when he made this film. You know, he was just thinking of the story that was in his head. The story that he wanted to tell about that poor woman that had been raped. He wanted to get her message across so that when these killings happened, you completely understood. And I gotta say, if I'm on a jury, I probably wouldn't convict Jennifer. Even though she took the law into her own hands, the way this character was handled by these atrocious men in the movie, don't put me on that jury. That's all I'm gonna say. So anyway, guys, I think you get the point. That is my review for I Spit on Your Grave. I have seen the remake. I will definitely review the remake sometime down the line. But, I mean, this is definitely a conversation piece. Let me know your thoughts on I Spit on Your Grave. Have you seen it? If you have seen it, is it a movie that you watch often? In the documentary for this movie, there are fans, you know, from like the last 5 years that were actual rape victims, and they sort of became obsessed with the movie. It's really interesting to watch, actually, because you would think the opposite would happen. And the opposite does happen for the most part, probably. But it is possible for, you know, a rape victim to find a movie like this somewhat therapeutic. I mean, it literally happened. If you watch the documentary, you'll see what I'm talking about. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free Fall Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.